Hello, welcome. Thank you for listening to my talk on photosynthesis, which is covered in Chapter 6 of your textbook. So in Chapter 5, we were talking about biosynthetic pathways, which are series of reactions where the products of the first reaction are the reactants or the substrate of the next reaction. And photosynthesis is a process that can be described as a biosynthetic pathway. Almost all of the energy that's found in terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems comes from the sun. And photosynthesis is the process by which autotrophs or producers capture the sunlight's energy. So chloroplasts are structures in the cells of leaves and cyanobacteria and algae that are responsible for carrying out the process of photosynthesis. So as we're moving through today's talk, we're going to be looking at what happens in photosynthesis, but I wanted to tell you where it happens. So inside of the chloroplasts, there are structures called thylakoids, and they have lots of membranes, and they're stacked together in columns that look like stacks of green coins called grana. And then the stroma is a semi-liquid substance similar to cytoplasm, which is inside of the chloroplast and surrounding the thylakoid. So within the thylakoid membranes, there are photosystems which contain pigments such as chlorophyll and proteins, and these are embedded in the thylakoid membrane, which is made of a phospholipid bilayer like a plasma membrane. And so the pigments capture the sun's energy or the light energy, and then the energy is passed along between molecules in the membrane of the thylakoid in a way that the cell is able to harvest it to create ATP. So the overall chemical equation that you may be used to seeing for photosynthesis is this one. This question mark should actually be an arrow pointing in this direction. And so the reactants are carbon dioxide, water, and light energy. And then the products are glucose, water, and oxygen. And so photosynthesis is divided into two major parts. The first part is the light-dependent reactions. The second part is the light-independent or dark reactions, also known as the Calvin cycle. And so the light-dependent reactions, as the name suggests, take place in the presence of light, and the main products of the light-dependent reactions are ATP, which as we know is the energy currency of the cell, and NADPH, which for the purposes of this class you can think of also as a temporary carrier of energy for the cell. And so then in the light-independent reactions, the products of the light-dependent reactions are used to drive the Calvin cycle, which is what converts carbon dioxide from the air to glucose. And so there are actually three stages of photosynthesis. The first two stages are part of the light-dependent reactions. The first one is capturing the sun's energy. The second one is using that energy in order to generate ATP and NADPH. And then the light-independent reactions is where the Calvin cycle uses ATP and NADPH to drive the process of making carbohydrates or glucose from atmospheric carbon dioxide. And this is a figure from your book, just sort of showing where the process is happening. So this is a chloroplast, and this is zoomed in on the chloroplast. This is the grana, which is a stack of thylakoids. And then it's zooming in on the membrane of a thylakoid here, and you can see the phospholipid bilayer. And this is a photosystem, which is embedded in that membrane. And it's just kind of showing where the process is happening in the cell. Okay, so light is made up of packets of energy, which are called photons. And sunlight has photons of varying or different energy levels. And the pigments, such as chlorophyll, are molecules that absorb energy from sunlight. So the main pigment that we're going to talk about or think about when we think about photosynthesis is chlorophyll. It absorbs light at the end of the visible spectrum, so it's absorbing mainly blue and red wavelengths of light. And then there are two kinds of chlorophyll. There's chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Okay, so we're going to talk about the light-dependent reaction. So basically, the photosystem, which has the chlorophyll pigment, captures energy from the sun, and then the energy is passed around within the photosystem and causing the photosystem to release an excited electron, which is charged with energy, and it's transferred from the photosystem to the electron transport chain. And when it says to an electron acceptor, it's it's a molecule that can accept that electron, the primary molecule or the first molecule in the electron transport chain. And then the lost electron is replaced by an electron donor. And this is just a little cartoon showing basically what happens. This is a photon of light hitting the chlorophyll, being passed around until the photosystem releases an electron. Then that electron is replaced by an electron donor. So there are two photosystems. There's photosystem 2 and photosystem 1. Both of them capture a photon of light, release an excited electron, and pass that to the primary electron acceptor in the electron transport system. Each photosystem has its own electron transport system. And the takeaway from this is that photosystem 2 produces ATP, while photosystem 1 produces NADPH. So the electron transport chain, I should say a little bit more about. It's basically a series of molecules along the thylakoid membrane that can accept the electrons and release a small amount of energy in a way that the cell can capture it to drive the process of creating ATP and NADPH instead of just having the electron be released and having the energy just kind of burn off. The electron transport systems for each photosystem allow the cell to harvest that energy in a way that's productive. And so this is a drawing or a schematic of how the photosystems work together. So this is photosystem 2, and this is just showing the electron acceptor, the electron being excited, and then being accepted by the electron transport system, which passes it down the energy gradient and allowing it to produce ATP. The lost electron from photosystem 2, you'll want to know this, is replaced by the splitting of water, and one of the byproducts is atmospheric oxygen. And so when the electron for the electron transport chain for photosystem 2 gets to the final electron acceptor, that electron actually is what replaces the lost electron from photosystem 1. So then this is showing photosystem 1 here. The light energy hits the pigment, the electron's excited, and then it's passed to the primary electron acceptor in the electron transport system for photosystem 1, which allows the cell or the chloroplast to harvest energy in order to produce NADPH. So the lost electrons from photosystem 2 are replaced by water. The lost electrons from photosystem 1 are replaced by the final electron acceptor for the electron transport system for photosystem 2. Okay, so, and this is just a summary of what I just said about where the lost electrons, how the lost electrons are replaced. So, okay, so the process by which the electron transport chain for photosystem 2 generates ATP or in another way of saying it, it converts ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate, which has only 2 phosphate molecules. The process by which that is converted to ATP is called phosphorylation or chemiosmosis. And it's just adding a phosphate group to an ADP molecule to create ATP. And this is just another picture showing sort of how the photosystems are linked in the membrane of the thylakoid. Okay, so after going through all of that, basically the products of the light-dependent reactions are ATP, produced by photosystem 2, and NADPH, produced by photosystem 1. And these are, ATP, as we know, is the energy currency of the cell, and NADPH is another molecule that's temporarily storing energy. And those are used to drive the Calvin cycle, which is where atmospheric carbon from carbon dioxide is used to make glucose. And the normal or most common biosynthetic pathway for photosynthesis is called C3 photosynthesis. And it takes 6 rounds of the Calvin cycle in order to make one new glucose molecule. One reason that this is called C3 photosynthesis, or the reason, is that the first molecule that is fixed is a 3-carbon molecule. Okay, so some plants have trouble carrying out C3 photosynthesis when it's hot. And the reason for that is that in order to take in the carbon dioxide necessary to use to create glucose, the plants have to open special cells in their leaves called stomata to let the carbon dioxide in. And when they open the stomata, that allows water to escape. And so if it's really hot and dry, then when the stomata are open, that's going to allow more water loss. And that's obviously bad for the plants to lose too much water. But closing the stomata indefinitely isn't really an option either, because if the stomata are closed in order to prevent water loss, it also prevents the plant from taking in carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen. And if they're not able to take in carbon dioxide, they're not able to produce glucose. So it's a problem. One of the alternate pathways that some plants have adapted to using in hot climates in order to deal with the problem of water loss is called C4 photosynthesis. And these plants, some examples include sugarcane, corn, and there are many grasses that also use it. It's called C4 photosynthesis because the first carbon molecule that is fixed has 4 carbon atoms in it. And so the way this works is basically that the carbon is first fixed in the mesophyll cells, and it then is transferred to bundle sheath cells, which are impermeable to CO2. So it makes the use of CO2 a lot more efficient and keeps the cell from having to lose a bunch of water in order to take in CO2. So the carbon is first fixed in the outer mesophyll cells, and then the CO2 enters the Calvin cycle in the bundle sheath cells. And this is an illustration of that. You see the mesophyll cells right here. CO2 enters and then is fixed, and then it is transferred into the bundle sheath cell and undergoes the Calvin cycle. The other alternate pathway I wanted to mention that plants use to deal with hot weather and the problem of water loss and letting in carbon dioxide is called CAM metabolism, or crassulacean acid metabolism. And it is a pathway for photosynthesis that allows the plant to open the stomata at night to take in CO2 and then to keep the stomata closed during the day so that not as much water is lost that way. And that is the end of today's lecture. Thank you so much for listening, and you can look for a discussion on Chapter 7, which is